I want to do a series on fairy tales. Now, I'm going to start with European fairy tales, and then I'll try to find other models from other parts of the world and see how we learn. We don't come scripted, so we learn how to be in the world through our patterns and through our stories that we hear here, which is why we so love the raconteurs, the storytellers in our communities. They still exist in many forms, and they still exist in book form. But we are returning to the oral form, which was the original and I think the most effective way to relay stories, to relay how we as human beings function, because we don't come with instructions. So we are told fairy tales, we are told stories. And some of these fairy tales I think are still very applicable. And I'm just going to give a few and see to show how deep they run in our collective unconscious. In tales like Snow White and Cinderella, the biological mother is often absent, dead, or simply gone. There's a reason for that. 1/4 of all women died in childbirth. Either the hips weren't wide enough, weren't formed, which is terrifying, or nutrition, or simply they bled out, or a myriad of other conditions, which we now have solved, and that's no longer the case. But still, now we have divorce, so we still have to deal with the stepmother, which is a different attachment. And there are wonderful stepmothers, and there are the classic evil stepmother. So in tales like Snow White and Cinderella, the biological mother is absent. And in her place comes a stepmother who is jealous, vain, and destructive. On the surface, it's a simple villain, but psychologically, the stepmother represents something every child eventually faces: the split between the nurturing, idealized mother and the mother who has her own frustrations, her own dark side. So this actually applies to everyone. Children don't want to see their own mother as cruel, so the stepmother becomes a safe way to externalize the fear. This lesson: not all care comes from a place of love. You will encounter people who seem like they should protect you, but instead want to harm you. Learn to tell the difference. And there's the big bad wolf. In Little Red Riding Hood, the wolf is charming. He talks to the girl, he tricks her, and then he consumes her. The original versions were graphic. The wolf doesn't just eat the grandmother. He often makes the girl unknowingly partake in acts of cannibalism before she is devoured. This is a brutal lesson for a child. The world contains predators who look friendly. The Red Hood, often interpreted as a symbol of a girl entering womanhood. The wolf is a danger of naivete, of straying from the path, of trusting a smooth talker. The story teaches that danger often wears a charming smile, and that listening to your gut and your community's warnings can save your life. Now, Rapunzel, in the original tale, Rapunzel's mother craves a plant from the witch's garden, and the witches uses that desire to steal the child. Rapunzel is raised in a tower with no door, only a window. The witch calls up, "Rapunzel, let your hair down." That's the only way in. When the prince finally comes, he learns the call. But the real psychological twist is that what Rapunzel says. She accidentally reveals the prince by innocently asking the witch why her clothes are getting tight. revealing she's pregnant. In early versions, the witch cuts her hair, casts her out, and the prince is blinded by thorns. What are the instructions here? Rapunzel teaches about isolation and the power of a name. The plant's name gave the witch power over her. More deeply, it's about the transition from childhood to adulthood. The tower is a protective space that becomes a prison. You cannot stay in the tower forever. Growing up means learning to let down your hair, to be vulnerable, and also learning that even the vulnerability can be exploited. The prince has to go through blindness to finally be healed by her tears. The lesson, love and freedom often come through pain and resistance. And then there's Ariel. The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen is an example of it not being a happy musical. The mermaid longs for an eternal soul, which she can only get if a human loves her. She makes a deal with the sea witch. Her tongue is cut out, she loses her voice, and every step she takes on land feels like walking on knives. In the end, the prince marries someone else, and the mermaid is given a chance to kill him to save herself. She refuses and dissolves into sea foam. What's the psychological instruction here? It's not give up your voice for a husband. It's a warning. The tale says, do not sacrifice your essential self, your voice, your identity, for the promise of love. Love that requires you to be silent and to endure constant pain is not love. The original mermaid doesn't get the prince. She gets something more profound. She earns a chance at an eternal soul through her suffering and sacrifice. The story is preparing children, especially girls, for the reality that not every love story ends in marriage, and that often self-betrayal is a far greater loss than any romantic failure. And then finally, Snow White is a child who is abandoned by the huntsman, delivered to the huntsman by the stepmother, by the evil stepmother, who feels threatened by her beauty, and finds shelter with 7 strangers, the miners. She doesn't survive because she's passive. She survives because she offers them domestic order in exchange for protection. But the queen keeps finding her 3 attempts: a thick bodice, a poisoned calm, and finally the apple. Each time the dwarfs save her. The lesson is layered. First, strangers can be a source of safety when your own family turns on you. That's an important reality in unsafe homes. Second, danger doesn't just come once, it comes in disguised forms repeatedly. And third, the final rescue doesn't come from dwarfs, but from the prince. But only after Snow White has died, quote unquote, and been laid out in a glass coffin. The glass coffin is a symbol of a suspended childhood. The prince's arrival wakes her into adulthood. But the story makes clear, before you can be ready for the transition, you must learn to recognize poison when it's offered in a pretty form. And that's all that these lessons tell us. Now, I find it interesting that most of these lessons are for girls. Men are not taught fear. Women are taught beware, don't get pregnant. Men are taught be courageous, go out to war, save and represent your count, your king, give up your individual self for the greater self of the village, of the community. I'll have to go dig some deeper into that because I'm sure there's a lot of narratives on that. And there, the, like the tales of, I'm sure, King Arthur, the Round Table, and all these tales of heroism and courage, and these tales have in common that they don't protect children by hiding the darkness. They prepare children by naming it. They give form to fears, and this is really important. Stepmothers, wolves, witches, isolation, losing your voice, so that those fears become manageable. Speak your fears. The child learns through story that the world has dangerous people, that innocence is not enough, and that survival requires cunning, patience, and sometimes the help of unexpected allies. Fairy tales were the original attachment story. Attachment theory. They showed a child, here is what the wolf looks like. Here is what happens when you trust too easily. Here is what it costs to give up your voice. But they also show resilience. The child who escapes, the girl who finds her way home, the pure prince who endures blindness to be reunited. They don't offer guarantees for a happy ending. They offer the map. And in doing so, they give children something every psychologist today would recognize: a way to mentally rehearse the vicissitudes of life before they had to face them for real. These stories endure not because they're pretty, but because they're true. Attachment, life, gentle parenting, beware. Children need to know about the realities of life. Children don't come with instructions, and if the parents aren't there, the stories will be, because stories are available, should be available, in libraries, in books. Let's keep it that way. Thank you.